good evening everyone, and welcome to the Open Door Show from Property CEO, which obviously you've guessed because you've logged on, you've registered for it, you'd have known it's from Property CEO. You've been surprised if it was from someone else, wouldn't you? Anyway, my name's Richard Clapson and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child.
Good evening everybody, hope you're well.
He's so polite, isn't he? Always so polite. Great to have you here. And just in case this is your first time with us, and there might be a couple of new names definitely on the list, looking down at the list that I don't know. What have you let yourself in for? Well, 45 minutes, that's our aim. 45 minutes of non-stop positivity, all around the theme of property and business development. Isn't that right, Ian?
Certainly is. Rich and I run a company called propertyCEO. And basically, our job is to train people how to become successful small-scale property developers. Lots of amazing opportunities out there right now, particularly for people looking to get in to property development. Maybe they've not done it before. So we want to help people find out more about those opportunities and to see if development might be a good fit.
That's right. Now, I mean, I don't know whether we're in a recession or what we are, but I mentioned this on a webinar today. I was chatting to some people and I heard this a few weeks back. I think someone in America said, I don't know whether we're in a recession or not, but we're certainly in a great big hole and it's going to take some climbing to get out of it. I quite like that. Anyway, look, whatever. But I can tell you now that these situations, recessions, big, deep holes, whatever you want to call it, they create opportunities, but only for those that are willing to go and seek them out and go and do something about it. Anyway, we're going to be serving up bits of advice, bits of predictions. Every now and then we have guests. I suppose you could call it a little bit of training. But above all, we're going to have a bit of fun doing it. We're happy to take questions because it is a question and answer show. We're going to do the news. We're going to give you a bit of news updates. Not the weather or what's going on with COVID. A little bit of property related news. And we're going to talk a little bit about planning permission or not planning permission as well. And then we're going to take some questions. So please put the questions in the chat box. Who's on this evening? I see Rob's just signed on. Hello, Rob. Answer's on, Will's on, Gary's on, Karen's on, Joe's on, Randy's on, Gerd's on. Hello, Gerd. Good evening to you. Jonathan's on. Hello, Jonathan. Roma. Good evening, Roma. Doral. Gavin's on. Patrick, Adam, Adair, Liam, Jay, Jin, Josh, etc., etc., etc. Good evening, gents, says Dan. Very polite. Good evening, Dan, says the gents. And good evening, chaps, says Gavin. Good evening, Gavin, says the chaps. And good evening, lovely Property CEO, ladies and gents. Who says they're ladies and gents? That's Ranjit from Ranjit Singh from Property Investor News. You heard of that magazine, Ian? Any good?
I've heard it mentioned somewhere before.
Yeah, once or twice.
We
We always give a free plug to Ranjit from Property Investor News, just because we love him. He's a great guy. And it's a great magazine, actually, to be fair. And Deb says, thank you, Ranjit, for including us ladies. Oh, very well. There you go. What do you think, Debs? Do you think we don't include you? We always say hello to the ladies. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen and ladies, which obviously you prefer, so we don't upset you. Anyway, let's do a bit of news. Shall we do a bit of news, Ian?
Let's do a bit of news.
Have you got anything going on in the news this week that you've picked out? I've got a couple of articles to mention very quickly before we do the stuff about planning. Okay,
well, I've got a little bit of an update from a couple of articles in Property Week, which is kind of a bit of a follow-up on a bit of a theme, which is, of course, what's happening in the high street. So I've got here news that Boohoo has bought the remaining Arcadia brands. You might have read about that. So 214 more stores going to close with the loss of 2,500 jobs, unfortunately. So if they basically just bought Dorothy Perkins, Wallace and Burton, between them and ASOS, I think they had Top Shot, Top Man, Miss Selfridge. So I know Rich is disappointed with that, and Debenhams as well. So if you add that lot up, I make it 403 stores that are going to come on the market. And I think critically, we've been talking about the high street, what's going to happen in the high street. I think one of the critical things about those types of stores is that they're anchor stores. So all of the other smaller stores that are kind of in the vicinity are all going to suffer because of the lack of footfall basically going into the high street. So definitely times are changing, and we await with interest what's going to happen with the changes in PD in particular that's going to come in later this year. And then the second one I saw, which was again in Property Week, was kind of linked to that. It was really an analysis of the amount of retail space that there is available now empty on UK high streets, over 15 million square feet. I mean, basically, yeah, the Debenhams and Arcadia issues have compounded it, but the trend has been there for a while. We really do have a significant proportion of the retail space is now empty and crying out to be repurposed. So it's going to be an interesting year, I think, for the high street.
Yeah, Dev says, wow, that's a lot of stores to repurpose. Exactly, Dev, a lot of stores for developers. I've got a couple of news articles. There's an interesting one here. This was in Property Week. This is today, actually, and it says industry bodies warn planning overhaul could destroy UK high streets. Nice and dramatic, isn't it? This is all the Class E overhaul going for permitted development rights, and the leading industry bodies have written to the Housing Secretary Robert Jennick calling for him to reconsider his plans to extend the permitted development rights. Good luck. He probably won't. What they're getting at, and they're partly right. I'm going to put a comment out on this on the Facebook group. They're sort of partly right in terms of what they said is, putting ground floor housing in a random and uncontrolled manner within high streets does not draw footfall, does not support new businesses, etc. Yeah, I mean, we've done a few articles recently in some of the presses where we've been asked to comment on this, and we've been saying, yeah, there does need to be some element of control around it, because you just don't want to be just randomly doing these things. But the principle is absolutely spot on. And what I'd say to these leading industry bodies, well, what's your proposal then? Because if your proposal is leave the high streets as is, they're dead. So that's not a very good proposal. So, the article sort of says, oh, no, this is no good. We'll come up with something that it is good. So, sorry, get a bit stressed with that, wasn't I? But anyway, that aside.
Calm down.
And there's another article. This was from a few days ago, and it said, this is interesting. I quite like this, you see, because this actually agrees with what I say. Not many people agree with what I say, not even my wife or my children. Anyway, London's high streets will become leisure-led. Within 10 years, London, and this would apply anywhere, within 10 years, London's high streets will be leisure-led and feature very little retail, predict industry experts, more industry experts. And what it talks around is that they think there'd just be a handful of retailers showrooming products to be bought online. So they think most retail will be bought online. I think, it's absolutely spot on. And my comment on this would be, leisure-led or destination-led, because I think some of those retailers will be bespoke retailers that you do want to go to that won't be online. And so I think I'd rather say it's going to be destination-led. And if that's the big combination of leisure, they talk around 52. Oh no, that was the polls. I think there's somewhere, I'm sure they said that half of it would be leisure. I think a lot of it will be destination, whether some of it is restaurants and those things, yeah, but a very different feel. So there you go, it's a few bits of news for you, keep you updated with what's going on. What was I going to talk around? What did we say to people we would chat around tonight? What sort of headline grabber did we give them?
Was it Olympics?
Right. Why? I don't know. I asked you. You won't remember. Were you been asleep today?
I just know.
So why shouldn't you buy a scheme with planning permission? That was our sort of controversial headline, and you're probably all thinking, hang on a minute, guys, because and some of I can know some of you CEOs on here this evening are our students, and quite a lot of them aren't actually, quite a lot of you. So, but those that are students will probably be thinking, hang on a minute, you said planning permission's okay. Right, okay, let me explain that. Controversial headline grabber just makes you come along this evening, does it, and turn up and listen to us ramble on for a bit. So, I mean, it's an ulterior motive, but it's not incorrect. It's absolutely true. So first of all, let's just qualify. Don't go for a scheme without planning. Okay, that's a definite no-no, because if you do that, even if you're not a student of ours, I will be round and I'll probably shout and holler at you, even if you don't let me in, because that's wrong. There's too long a lead in. It goes out of your control. Why give away control if you don't have to? Think of it in your business or whatever business you're in. If someone else had some control over what you did, every time you wanted to do something, they would know. Or driving the car, if someone was pulling the steering wheel and just sending you where you want to go, or not preventing you from where you want to go, it's no good. I was on a webinar today. I was speaking on a webinar. In fact, actually, Pardeep is on. Good evening, Pardeep. It was Pardeep's webinar. I suspect he thought we were fantastic today. Anyway, we were talking about a similar thing. And I often said, going for planning permission, actually, Ian and I both spoke, and I wonder who was better, whether it was me or Ian. Pardeep might give us a bit of a score in a minute, out of 10 each of us.
Didn't think it was a competition, actually.
No, it's not a competition. No, it's not a competition, but if it was, I'd have probably won. So anyway, I reckon it's like planning's like going for a boxing match with one arm tied behind your back. You wouldn't do it, would you? It's just, there's no point. So you definitely don't go without planning. But then the controversial statement is why you shouldn't buy a scheme with planning permission. Well, why not? Because you're probably thinking a scheme with planning, it's all boxed up. It's ready to go. Sounds great, doesn't it? You know, there's a nice scheme there, residential agent show bid of the week. It's all ready to go. There's the drawings. I just price it up. It's lovely, new build. But okay, where are you adding the value? That's my question. Where are you adding the value? How are you being creative? Well, I'm not being creative, but it's all boxed up, ready to go. Yeah, but you're an entrepreneur. You must be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you'd be watching Coronation Street or something. You're sat here listening to us, so you must be entrepreneurial in some description. So how can you win the deal? Well, the only way you win the deal is on price, because you're not being creative, are you? So you're going to build it cheaper, or you're going to sell it for more. Now, you can, someone might be shouting at the camera. They might say, well, you can improve the planning, Clapson. Well, yeah, you could improve the planning a little bit, but that's quite rare. Some instances you can, and we've had students do that, but generally assume that's quite rare. So the only way you can win it is on price. And winning something on price, that's generally called the race to the bottom. Not that good. Who buys these things? Builders. The 2 or 3 unit schemes, particularly, are probably a bit bigger than maybe 5 or 6. Above that, maybe, okay? But builders are going to buy those because they can always build it cheaper. And they don't need the profit on the development. Or self-builders can buy these things and build them out, not developers. And if a developer has bought a scheme that's got planning and it's all boxed up, ready to go, they've either got their numbers wrong or they don't know what they're doing, because too many people give development a go. So the message really is just don't buy a scheme that's all boxed up, ready to go, because someone else has taken the profit out of that scheme. And they price, particularly these smaller sites, they're priced up high because builders will buy them. That's why they price them up at that level. As you get bigger, yeah, maybe 10, 11, 12, perhaps not. There's a bit of profit in them. But someone's still taken all the planning game. And where can you be creative? Do you want to go back in the planning system? My word, you don't want to do that, do you? That's a crazy thing to do. We're back in the boxing match with one arm behind our back. Ludicrous. You don't want to do it. Okay, you say. So what do? We don't buy it without planning. We don't buy it with planning. Well, those students of ours will know, and I expect a lot of you will know as well. So hello, Michelle. Michelle's just joined us. Good evening to you. Michelle will know. She's a student of ours. Michelle will know. She'll be shouting it at the camera right now. I'm absolutely certain. I'm sure she will know. Good evening, Steve. Steve's just joined us. I haven't spoken to you for some time. I'm sure you're well. So we do little shout outs every now and then. It's like a bit of a social event for us. Well, what should you do? Well, it's permitted development rights, isn't it? That's what you should be doing. Right now, but not this evening, obviously, but right now, you can convert offices without full planning permission. You can convert retail units without full planning permission. You can convert agricultural buildings without full planning permission. You can demolish buildings and build new without full planning permission. And you can, in some instances, add extra floors to buildings without full planning permission. You can do all those things. And the new stuff that's going on, which I was just talking about, where industry bodies warn that planning overhaul could destroy UK high streets. Well, this is all about the new use class E, the super use class. We like the word super, don't we? That sounds quite extravagant. Super use class E. It encompasses shops, financial and professional services. To you and I, that's called a bank generally. Cafes or restaurants, offices, light industrial, clinics, health centres, day nurseries, gyms, and indoor recreational centres. All of those buildings under this new super use class can also be moved around within their own group. But actually, the current proposal is from the 1st of August this year, assuming it goes through unaltered, they can all be converted to residential. How good's that? Terrific, isn't it? So why would you not take one of those buildings and be creative, be an entrepreneur? It's a great word. Wish I knew how to spell it. It's quite tricky to spell, but it's a terrific word. And being an entrepreneur means being creative. And this is where you make profit. This is where developers make profit. By adding value, seeing something that someone else can't see. That's what you want to do. You don't want to buy a boxed up, all ready to go planning scheme. You want to add value to it. If you have to, I'd rather you do that. I'll be less cross with you if you buy a boxed up planning scheme, providing you've got a robust set of numbers. The chances are you've got your numbers wrong if you make it work. You definitely don't buy a scheme without planning. For your first development, in time, when we teach students to be developers, and they can do anything. And some students do go and do stuff with planning, but it is a long lead in. If you're prepared for that, that's fine. But generally, if you want to go out there and change your life and make 100, 200,000 a year out of development with the easiest route and the least risk, and be a bit creative and make a bit of profit, permitted developments is where you need to be. Far less risk. So why wouldn't you make your life easier? There you go. That's why we gave you that controversial headline. That's what it's all about. So why wouldn't you do that if you could make your life easier? So have we got any questions along that? So Michelle says, yeah, love the one arm behind the back analogy. There you go, Michelle. You see, that's good, isn't it? No one else says they liked it. It's just you, Michelle. So I'm quite happy with that.
I think one of the things just to add is that a lot of people, when they look at planning permission, it says on the tin, it will take 8 weeks or 13 weeks, depending on how complex it is. But that actually really doesn't bear scrutiny. As soon as you go down that path, you quite often find that because of the sheer volume of stuff and sort of areas that the local planning authority can call you to task on, those timelines can very quickly go off the scale. And as Richie says, for your first development, you really don't want to be sort of ready to go, all prime, team in place, everything sorted, lovely deal, but then it grinds to a halt for months and months on end. Absolutely no way to do your first program. So stick with permitted development to start off with. Right, sorry, I wasn't supposed to do that, was I? So let me.
A couple of comments. We've got to pick up these couple of comments. So Pardeep, we asked him how we presented today, and he said you were pretty decent. Now he's not distinguishing, so I assume he's putting us both in the same camp, Ian.
Right. Yeah, he's hedging his bets there. Okay.
He's sitting on the fence. And yeah. I chuckled just then. I chuckled at Joe's comment. Joe says, we don't buy with planning. We don't buy without planning. It sounds like the start of the book. We're going on a bear. I love it, Joe. Love it. All right, shall we be serious? Let's do some questions. Who's asking us a question?
Okay, I've got a very, very serious question here from Sarah. And Sarah asks, can you explain again why a builder can outbid you and why they don't need a profit on the development? Well, so they don't really need to make a profit. I mean, effectively, they've got, if you think about when you hire a builder or contractor to do a project, then they charge you 100, but they already got a margin within that. So if a builder is building a project himself, he's effectively already got a margin built in it. He doesn't need to add a developer's profit on top. The other thing that can quite often happen with builders, particularly when work dries up, is that they basically look for what they call hospital jobs, which you can imagine builders and contractors have got typically teams of people around them. There's sort of subcontractors and members of their kind of their business who they get to work on their projects. And of course, if they've not got a pipeline of projects lined up, then you've got all sorts of tradespeople that are there with no job to do. They can't afford to pay them. So that then those tradespeople go off and work for a competitor. And of course, there's no guarantee they can get them back. So that's kind of worst case scenario for a lot of builders. What they do is they find a nice project where they can outbid developers because they don't need to make that margin, and then they can keep their teams working on that project when there's no other work to be done, keeps them nice and busy, and they don't lose the team and they don't lose money. The other, for that part of the market as well, also just to be aware, self-builders can also be people you can't compete with, particularly if you're looking at a plot where you're building a single property, a single residence, then quite often those are keenly contested by self-builders who, again, are not looking to make a profit specifically. So yeah, that's why builders don't necessarily need to make a profit on a development for those small ones. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very good. Christian says, hello, Ian and Richie. Hello, how are you? Mo's just joined us as well just now. Good evening to you. Deb says, I'm buzzing tonight. Yeah, we are a bit as well. We're quite excitable. As I had a great chat with a planning consultant about a project without planning permission. Anyway, don't know why you haven't told me to talk to a planning consultant before. Yeah, I think that's laugh out loud, smiley, smiley face. So yes, we have told you many, many times. People actually are now listening to us. This is one of our students who's eventually listening, is actually now accepted that she's going to be coachable. I like that. That's good. Okay, what's the next question? We've got a question in here. Sorry, I'm just zooming up and down here. Ansar says, good evening, Ansar. He says, the question here is, does permitted development still require permission from local authority, or are you able to just carry out the conversion? Interesting question, actually, because it depends, okay? And what does it depend on? Well, most of these permitted development rights, knocking down, putting extra floors on, some of those are a bit controversial. Be careful, don't do those as a guinea pig. Don't be the first one that goes out and tests some of those. They're fairly new in the marketplace. But some of the other conversions, like office conversions, agricultural, retail ground floor conversion, and I'm distinguishing that out, some of those require, and so what's called a prior notification. So you have to submit an application to the local planning authority, but they can only assess you on a half a dozen or so things. Okay, whereas a normal planning process is completely open-ended. Some permitted development right applications, prior notification applications, have a timescale, so they have to be determined in a certain timescale. If not, you can just get on with it. But when I say depends, one of these, which is the conversion, it's called Class G, okay, and it's the conversion of retail upper floors. So you take a shop and you want to take the upper floors, you can convert those to residential flats. You can put 2 flats above each shop. There are ways you can get more flats above each shop. There are a few little tricks of the trade that we talk to our students and teach them. So, but in principle, Ansar, Class G, you can do it without even asking, in principle. Now, take advice from your planning consultant to make sure you actually are qualifying, okay? And sometimes you might need to have what's called a lawful development certificate because your funders might actually want that. But in principle, you don't need to ask. You can just get on and do it. And do you know the other exciting thing? Because we like exciting things tonight, don't we? You can do it in a conservation area and you can do it on a listed building. Who'd know now?
What's not to like?
What's not to like, eh? So absolutely. So it depends. Some with and mostly with, but an odd one without. Hopefully that's answered that question. What's
Okay.
next,
We've got one here from Debbie. If I went to an architect or project manager first, do you think they would introduce me to other consultants for other services, structural engineering, etc.? Good evening, Debbie. Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way of getting recommendations. Probably a few things you need to check. Make sure that it's not their brother-in-law, or that there's no sort of direct connection between the people they're recommending. And I think the other thing I'd do is get multiple recommendations. What you tend to do is you go to build your team, tend to find that the same names get mentioned. So make a point of trying to get recommendations from professionals, not obviously for competing professionals, but for other people that they've worked with in the past. Because let's be honest, if the chances are, if you're getting a recommendation for somebody, then they will have done a good job and they probably got on with them. So the two things that you don't want to happen with your professional team is that they all hate each other and they're completely rubbish. So doing it that way, you've got a fighting chance that you're going to be sort of avoiding both of those, but it doesn't stop you doing your due diligence. So whatever recommendations you get, then definitely do your due diligence. I think we had Mike Sandu on last week, the architect, who said with absolute confidence, just ask him, he'd be able to put together a professional team for you in the drop of a hat. I think that's possible, but I think you probably want a few other people involved that aren't already connected, don't already know each other, just to keep everybody honest. And you can always change your team after the first project if you find there's a few pennies in there that aren't quite as shiny as you hoped. There you go, Debbie. Hope that helps.
I'd be slightly cautious of Mike Sandu saying he could do it at the drop of the hat, because to the best of my knowledge and recollection last week, he never had a hat in sight. So I don't see him
good spot, yeah.
Any minute soon. If you're not sure about that, please listen to the replay. And those that have just joined us, those that are new, those that have joined a little bit late, we're not going to hold it against you. But for everyone that has just joined or hasn't been here before, all of the replays of all of the Open Door shows are on YouTube. Go onto our YouTube channel, type in propertyCEO, and you can listen to your heart's content, probably from here now to next week, solidly. Listen to us going on Open Door, if that's your poison. Christian says, buying without planning can be quite risky. because one could lose the planning fees and the architect costs if not successful. That's a statement. I thought it was going to be a question. Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that. Malcolm says, hello, Malcolm. Malcolm says, do you still need building regs, even with the permitted development, even with Class G? Yes, even with Class G, even with building regulations. Okay, even with PD. Yes, Malcolm, and yes, for everyone, you do need building regulations. You're not exempt. Pretty much anything you do where you alter the layout, the use of a building requires building regulations, because building regulations cover all sorts of things. They cover fire, access, disabled access, sound insulation, structures, etc., etc., etc. So yes, 100 million% you need building regulations, Malcolm. So you've got to go and do that. What you got, Ian? What's next?
I've got one here from Liam. Good evening, Liam. What do you think about the requirements for housing? Do you think the market will now slow down for a few years? I've heard that some national house builders have stopped building. Okay, well, yes, we kind of think we mentioned that on one of the news items recently. The house builders have certainly slowed down, but effectively they've slowed down because they're concerned about, I think, putting properties into the market in 2021. So if we take the analysts' predictions on face value, and they all seem to be saying broadly the same thing, we're expecting a dip in the housing market in 2021, and then a recovery in 2022, and pretty much back to normal towards the back end of 2022 and then into 2023. So I think what's happened with the home builders is that they've basically tried to suppress the pipeline of properties coming into the market in 2021 when the market's slow. That's likely to pick up again as we come out of 2021 and into 22 and beyond. I think the other thing I'd say is that the government reckons we need 300,000 new homes every year. So there is definitely an appetite to build new homes. In terms of the timing of it, if you're developing properties now, then let's be honest, not going to go into the market with the best one in the world until 2022 anyway. And so, you know, we typically look at maybe an 18 to 24 month timeline. So you're, by the time, if you're going to be developing properties, you're likely to be putting them in the market at a time when we've hopefully got over that dip. But yeah, I think it's a slowdown in the short term, and then we'll quickly get back to business as usual when the market picks up again.
Oh, good.
Anything you want to add to that?
Well, no, I just thought normally at the end you say, who was that? That was Liam, wasn't it? You always say Liam, hopefully that answers the question.
I do apologise. Fantastic question. Thank you very much.
Well, it was obviously good. You're doing a good job, because Sarah, when you answered about the builder, Sarah says, thanks for the advice. That's very useful. And Debbie says she was the one talking about, we'll get introductions from my architect or project manager. She says, I'm going to speak to my project manager. Thank you, Ian. Okay, and Ansa says, thank you, Richie, for the answer. There's obviously lots of friendly thoughts and processes this evening. Right, what have I got up here? Ansa says, if you buy land without permission, how could you guarantee that you will be able to get development permission once purchased? You can't. You can't guarantee anything with planning, even if you do what's called a pre-app. Okay. You put a pre-app in and the planner say, yes, you're going to do that. You can't guarantee it. So, you know, if you buy something without planning, you are taking a risk. That's the bottom line. You're going to take a risk. And even if you've got a planning consultant that says, yeah, you're probably going to be okay. What I seem to remember in that sentence was the word probably, because you might not be. Okay. And with the best will in the world, and they're probably giving you the best advice, they think everything points towards the possibility that you're going to get planning, and you might not. So it is a risk. And that's fine. You know, when you've got a few developments under your belt and you've got a bit of liquid cash in the bank, why not take a couple of punts on a bit of land? It's exciting, it's good fun, but not for your first development. So I don't know where you're at, but if this is your first development, just don't. Just go for one of the permitted development rights. As I said, why wouldn't you make your life easier? You don't need to always fight, and you're fighting the planners. Just make your life a bit easier. So yes, unfortunately, there's no guarantee. It's a little bit tricky. Sorry about that. Sorry to disappoint you, but you don't get any BS or fluff here. You're just going to get a straight answer. Whether it's the answer you wanted or not, you're going to get a straight answer. What's next?
What's next? Well, before I give a straight answer to this one, I've got one here from Robert. Good evening, Robert. Great show, 18. I think that's me and you. What are your thoughts on the new proposed planning changes proposing that all of Class E goes to residential. Do you think that that will make it easier for first-time developers? And I think the answer to that it does. And I guess the reason it makes it easier is you basically got more options. So just to remind people, hopefully 1st of August, the government's proposing that everything in Class E, which is that long list that Richie mentioned earlier, they're going to be able to change with PD into residential. So all of a sudden, we've not only got properties that we couldn't convert under PD before, we've also got some that have lapsed, like light industrial. They'll be coming back into play. And also for the ones that we could always do, or in living memory, we could have done like commercial conversions. A lot of those have been date stamped, so you could only convert buildings that were commercial as at a certain point in time. And the new rules have basically updated that date. So that brings into play a whole new suite of group of buildings that could be converted. So I think you've got a huge opportunity in terms of for a new developer coming in, simply because there is much more choice of buildings to convert, different types to convert, and an appetite of the government to try and make it as easy as possible to convert. So we wait to see what they do. But Robert, hopefully that answers your question. Richie.
I chuckled just now. I chuckled when people put certain comments in.
You're trying to put me off? Is that for the?
Well, I said no BS or fluff. So Jonathan, bless him, Jonathan said, "Is BS and fluff your new Anton Deck names?" It just made me laugh.
I know which one's which.
Okay, possibly so. And Jonathan also made an interesting statement in here. He says government has said we have needed 300,000 homes per annum since 1980, and we have never achieved it. No, never achieved it. So a good statement. Let me go back up here. Joe's question. Can I pick up Joe's question? Joe says, I did a Google search for building control officers. Well done you. Locally, via Local Surveyors Direct, a compare the market style portal. Do you think certain services like a building control, highways assessments, flood, he's got a whole list here, flood assessments, energy calculations can be sought via Google, and others like architect, cost consultants or structural engineers strictly by recommendation? Well, you can, but if your question is, do I advise on it? No, because all these businesses are people businesses, okay? You know, a highways consultant is a specialist, okay? An energy consultant is a specialist. A flood risk assessment is a specialist. You know, and now some of these can be carried out by similar disciplines. Architects can do them, but they're all people. This is a people industry, like, well, every industry is really. And these are all professionals. Now, what I can tell you, okay, you could meet one highways consultant tomorrow and another one the day after. One would be great, one would be not so great, okay? And that's what you've got to face up to. There are really creative consultants and there's not so creative consultants. And you might just need a creative consultant to get around the problem that perhaps that you've got or you foresee coming your way, or to indeed to make sure you haven't got a problem. And so, you know, I've been kicking around this industry now for 40 years, and it does amaze me the quality range of professionals across all sectors. So don't think that your building control, your highways assessments, your floods, your energy are lesser consultants. Your architect, admittedly, and your structural engineer are probably your lead consultants. But all of these consultants, Joe, they play a part in the end game. So recommendations is great. The problem, and I guess it's always been a problem, but these days it's a bigger problem. You can create a huge amount of smoke and mirrors with the internet, okay? You know, and all sorts of things can go. So in the old days, you know, you'd have to have an office and people would have to pick up a telephone, and you'd soon catch out whether someone was a one-man band working from home or not, because the kids and the dogs are screaming in the back. It's very different. You very quickly can create a very professional image. Nothing wrong with that. But, you know, are these creative people, are they the ones you want? And like anything in life, don't you not want someone that someone says they're good? You know, they're really good. Like Pardeep said, we did okay today on the talk. You know, we did all right. Well, one of us, yeah, one of us. And you know, I don't like to take the credit always, but you know, to be fair, a little bit rubbed off on Ian's presentation as well. He did satisfactory. So, no, Joe, always, and for everyone out there, please go for recommendations. Your architect, your project manager, and your non-exec advisor, because this is how we train people, those that think of what we're talking about here. This is how we train people to build a team, build a leverage team around them. They will all have great recommendations for you, Joe. So that's what I'd prefer. No reason to not find them. Say to your architect, have you heard of any of these folks? And if they haven't, probably gives you the answer. Okay, there we go. What's next?
I just wanted to answer, so thanks for the second response, Richie. Presumably he wasn't very happy with the first one, but thanks, answer. I've got one here from Jamie, and Jamie says, I like the idea of doing some development without full planning. How would I get to fully understand these permitted development rights so I can start giving development a go? I am currently a BTL, buy-to-let landlord. Okay, well, probably the first thing to mention there, Jamie, is that, yeah, I wouldn't advise you give it a go. I don't think that's probably the right approach when it comes to development. I think there's lots of moving parts. You really need to get get yourself trained. You know, I'd probably say that running a training business, but ultimately you need an overview of the whole thing. The PD rights, I think, are really attractive. There's a lot, they've got a lot going for them. There's a lot of developers don't understand permitted development rights. There's a great opportunity there, but just being able to sort of focus on the opportunity and assume that everything else is going to be, you know, you don't need to know anything else, you know, that's definitely not the way to go. So get yourself a slightly broader education. What I do on the planning, and we kind of mentioned it before, is, yeah, work with a planning consultant. I always advocate, I think, when for new developers going in, if they're going to pick a particular type of permitted development that they want to do on their first project, and maybe it's one they're going to kind of niche down on, and that's going to be their thing, then it's well worth paying for some time to spend a few hours with a planning consultant, discussing the options and getting their expertise. It really does pay dividends, because, as Richie said, there's a lot of, you know, those guys really do know their stuff. They know all the little tricks of the trade, all of the, you know, a lot of the devil is in the detail. And whilst other people and the textbooks might be able to give you an overview and the broad sense of what the PD rights are, quite often there are some opportunities that hide behind the words, and your planning consultant is going to be able to shed some light on those. So well worth having a chat with a planning consultant, get your strategy sorted out, but please, please, please don't just give it a go. Get yourself trained, get yourself doing it properly. You will leverage a professional team around you, but you still need to know what's what and the kind of end-to-end of what you're trying to do. So Jamie, I hope that helps. Good luck if you do it.
Good stuff. Do you know, people don't think I'm sensitive. I am quite sensitive. I've now worked out, because originally Pardeep said you were pretty decent. He's now, obviously, clearly that was me, because he subsequently put Ian was awesome. Awesome sounds better than decent. So basically, Ian, you were better than me today. But Pardeep, you know how you can go off people.
I've always liked Pardeep, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I never liked him. Never off from the start. Malcolm says, can you issue a list of the new use classes? What do you think we are, an information service, Malcolm? We'll put it in the post here. Now, I'll tell you, Malcolm, the best place, go on to Allsop's website, allsop.co.uk, Allsop, and type, or if not, just type in Allsop, planning use classes. There's a great little PDF table that they have, and it's got all the news classes. It's got the old ones and the new ones in there, Malcolm. That's the best way to get it. Better than what we would send you. And, you know, we might not even send it to you. So there you go, Malcolm. Hopefully that there he goes. Yes. Yes. What do you mean? Yes. Does that mean thank you? Okay. Amelia says, I'm going to pick up a question from Amelia, because you know, she's got a question in, so we're going to try and answer it. She says, surely some of these retail stores that you're talking about coming on the market are too big for first-time developers. So where is the opportunity for us if we are just thinking of starting out? Good question. Yeah, I tell you what, Amelia, the last thing you want to do is take on the local Debenhams store in your town and try and convert it as a first-time developer. But let's have a think about all these stores. So Ian was talking about Topshop and Burton's and Wallace. Some of those are definitely going to be smaller units in some towns, and they are perfectly feasible and good schemes for a new developer to take on. Okay, they might just work. Don't just rush out and buy one, please. You need to know what you're doing. As Ian said, do not just give it a go. but they are definitely going to be feasible for first-time developers to go and take some of those stores on. And as remember, I talked earlier about Class G is one of the use classes where you can put flats over. You can actually multiply up the amount of flats you put over it by cutting and carving the shop. There's little tricks that you can do there when you know how, and indeed putting some flats on the ground floor. It's all about access and light and making it work. One of the processes we teach students is block planning to go and do these types of things. But even if all of those stores, Amelia, in your town were too big, what's going to happen, okay, when the Debenhams go, or they're gone, and the Top Shops and the Burtons and the Miss Selfridges, okay, what's going to happen then? Well, these are often what's called anchor stores. You know, these are what, because you get a big new shopping centre, they put a John Lewis or a Marks and Spencer's in. As soon as they're in there, a lot of the other retailers traditionally would have flooded in. I say traditionally because I think the world's changing. So when the big anchor stores go, what does that happen? Well, the reason people flood in when there's anchor stores is because it brings footfall. It brings people to the venue, okay, to that location. Well, when the big anchor stores go, that means there's going to be less footfall. What will that mean to other retailers? Sadly, okay, it will mean probably some other retailers will also go. Maybe some of the smaller retailers would disappear as well. So what will happen, Amelia, is to follow this process in your local town, and you'll see some of the other retailers disappearing as well as the town starts to have to reshape itself. So as sad as it is for retailers, and my heart goes out for them, but this is a changing world. You know, you've got to move with it. It's an opportunity for developers. So some of the schemes you're going to buy are going to be a lot more feasible in size. Hopefully that answers your question.
Fantastic. Got time for one more. I've got one here from John.
Yeah,
on this subject of planning consultants. He says, is it better to use an architect to get the planning for you, or use a planning consultant? Aren't they expensive? Well, John, yeah, absolutely. Some architects can be very good and are going to be able to get the planning for you. I think what I'd say though, particularly if you've got something that's a little bit more complex, then your planning consultant has got that extra level, an extra depth of knowledge and expertise. Ultimately, their hourly rate isn't going to be too much different, I would have said, to an architect. And you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, you kind of get what you pay for. If you're looking for kind of really specific expertise on a project, you know, for sure, architects have got a very broad knowledge and also very specific and detailed knowledge when it comes to design. But a planning consultant, they live and breathe that stuff. So I think, you know, it's, whilst architects can serve you very well in that regard, if you've got a more complex opportunity, or you think there might be a specific opportunity with regards to permitted development and so on, I would say that your planning consultant could well be worth a conversation. There you go. Hope that helps.
We can squeeze one more in because Kathy's just trying to wind me up this evening. Kathy, hello, good evening. Kathy says, Kathy, well, you're not listening right at the beginning of the show. Kathy says, what about going for land assembly? Blimey, Kathy, trying to push my buttons. What do you think of that? She says, they always look low risk because you don't have to buy the land. You can do an option. Then you get the planning uplift. Kathy, okay, look, Kathy, all due respect. Yeah, okay, you know, you said there, they always look low risk. Okay, they look low risk. To an extent, they are low risk to an extent, okay, because you're not going to go and buy it, okay? You're going to do it at land assembly, you're going to buy it with an option. Well, first of all, land assembly can take a long, long time. Just think of this process. You've got to get a load of people, Joe Public, as it were, trying to sell their land to you, their back gardens, which is traditionally what land assembly is, you know, patches of land bolted together. And they had no intention of selling it in the first place. So you've got to go and talk to them and get someone who wasn't going to sell something to sell it to you, which is fine. You can do that. You know, there's a lot of stuff we teach people about off-market deals, but Joe Public is much harder to deal with than it is to try and find off-market deals from businesses. So that is a skill set to have, okay? But when you go and do land assembly with Joe Public, then you've got to get Joe Public's neighbor and Joe Public's neighbor's neighbor. And of course, what happens, they all talk to each other. You've got to try and do this cleverly and get it all pulled together, and they all start charging you more and they're wanting more. And there's a lot of emotion with the public, okay? So public are very emotional people. We're all public and we all get emotional about those things. You know, we're all sensitive, as I said earlier, by Pardeep's comments, but we'll brush over that for now. So, you know, on that basis, you've got to pull all that together. How long is that going to take? And then, of course, you've got to try and get planning. So you've got to go down the planning system, which I said to you earlier is broken. and it can take a long time. And of course, you have to comply with all the regulations. You've got to comply with parking, all sorts of other things that they might ask and insist on you having to do. Now, yes, you could have it on an option, but you've got to pay out all those fees. And what happens if you pay out those fees and you still don't get the permission? Then you've lost a lot of money. Okay, maybe it's not a huge amount of money, but maybe it's £20,000. And can you afford, Kathy, to lose £20,000? Or could you spend your £20,000 more wisely? Okay, and an option agreement, there's a little statement here. Remember this, Kathy, any option agreement that you've got, Pardeep's just said you were dynamite. Now he's just crawling. I'm not having that. So, Kathy, any option agreement is really, it's not always worth the paper it's written on, because I can tell you, the one with the deepest pockets wins if you go to court. And I had a guy who I know, who, not a student of ours, but he was one of these ones that Ian said don't do. I think that was Jamie or someone earlier, don't give it a go. And this guy gave it a go, trying to do an option agreement with a landowner, and got planning permission, and the landowner basically stuck a couple of fingers up at him and said, oh, thanks very much, I've got the planning permission, don't want to deal with you anymore. And he said, well, we got an option agreement. He said, sue me. And that's as simple as that. So, Kathy, much wiser to spend your £20,000 and invest that in a scheme with permitted developments, because you're more likely to be successful with that. So hopefully that answers that question. We have gone beyond 1:45, and we always like to wrap the show up. We never, ever run past 8 o'clock. We always try and get you away just afterwards. So we hope to do the same this evening. Ranjit from Property Investor News, who wants another mention, because he's just put a comment in and says, another great show. I thought you were going to give us a weather news. Weather news? Ranjit, weather, it's cold outside, Ranjit. Cold. There you go. There's the weather news.
Definitely cold. Wherever you are, it's cold.
Yeah. Please put your thanks or comments in the chat box as we go. We like to do that because we do this show because you love it, and we love doing it because you love it. If anyone's interested in development, there are some new people on. I know there's some definitely new names. If you're interested in dipping your toe in the water beyond our sort of entertainment of property development news and subjects this evening, you are all welcome to come on a free half-day workshop with us. Okay, we call it the six-figure roadmap. It's not intended to teach you development. You're not going to learn how to be a developer in 3 hours, so don't get me wrong on that. Okay, but it will give you an overview. You can dip your toe in the water. It's myself and Ian. It is live. We will be doing it live. If you're interested, there's various dates. Pop on to propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap. Got that? Roadmap. propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap. There's a couple of dates in March coming up. One's on an evening, one's on a Saturday. If you're interested to come and spend 3 hours with us, completely free, and we will give you an overview about development. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. I think we're pretty much. Tom's just. Tom, you just joined. Tom's just joined. Tom, it's crazy. We're just about finished. You've missed all the exciting stuff and the prize giveaways, but never mind. Let's just see. Any final comments to say goodbye on, Ian, or shall I just do the last?
No, I'm just trying to work out on the Pardeep scale of appreciation where awesome ranks against dynamite. I've always assumed dynamite basically makes a lot of noise and is quite unstable, but I don't know. What?
Nothing. Anyway, thank you for joining us on another show. We've enjoyed it. Looks like you've enjoyed it, because Deb says, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you, A-Team, Ant and Deck, all the news, BS and fluff. I remember when Open Doors started with Rich and Ian. Now there are 8 of you. Great team with 8 of us. Love it. Pardee says, thanks, guys. Michael says, thanks, Rich and Ian. Speak soon. Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan says, thanks, BS and fluff. Thanks, blokes. Great as always. Thanks, blokes. That's Rob. There you go. Well done, Rob. Gavin says, thanks, chaps. Ansar says, great show, guys. Great content as always, says Dan. And sorry, really late in joining. Earlier next week, promise, says Tom. Okay, Tom, we'll hold you to that. Good night, everyone. Have a good week. Cheers. Goodbye.